And just like that, you all know what time of the month it is. It's the time of the month that I said I would be getting back into a project that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is the second book of The Glass Witch. This is going to be 3 books in total, and I think I've put off the second one long enough. But that does not mean I am any less terrified to start it, because while I may have just published this book in January of last year, the truth is that I had been working on it for so long, and I'd been working on it under the supervision of my editor, who was my former professor during my MFA program. It's been a long time since I finished revising this book, and a long time since I published it, and I know for a fact that my skills are not what they were back then. In fact, they've only grown. But I can't help that bit of imposter syndrome as I open up these old files, some of which were literally started 3 years ago. I keep wondering if I'll be able to do the next book as good as the first one. And you might guess by the faces I'm making here as I look over stuff that I wrote so long ago that I'm not exactly happy with it. But that's a good sign. My writing and what I think is good and what the story needs has changed a lot in the year or so I've taken off from it. I have grown as a writer, and I know that that's going to help me make this book exactly what I need to make it. So here's to the writing and rewriting of Book 2 of The Glass Witch. And if you haven't checked out the first already, definitely do, because the second is coming out this year. Oh boy, here we go again, and I hope you guys are ready, because you're going to be seeing quite a bit more writing content and writing thoughts from me in general, as obviously I have a one-track mind, and whatever I happen to be working on at this time, that's what I talk about the most. It's always been how my mind has worked. But now, I made it very clear to myself, as I was getting ready and hyping myself up for March, that this was not going to be a month of writing hardcore. This was going to be a month of looking over what I already had and trying to see what I actually could use and what I could not. Whereas when I was writing this book a couple years ago, at this point, I was just kind of floundering and fumbling around. I find myself approaching it with an almost surgery-like efficiency now. I can tell my writing skills have grown by how I am just able to cut through the nonsense. And you know what? I actually did even write 1,200 words of a brand new fresh start to this book. So for 2 sessions already, that's not bad at all. Granted, I have to write basically the entire thing over from the ground up, but you know what? I actually do have confidence that I can do this, so there you go. Let me break down to you how my writing schedule works as a professional writer. So, contrary to popular belief, I guess, you don't have to sit down and write, like, hours and hours a day, every single day, to get a book done. In fact, truth be told, if you want consistent writing progress, the trick is to focus on word count per day, not time per day. So let's do some writer math real quick, right? If we are going to write a full first draft, and we think of a first draft as, let's say, 100,000 words, that's a pretty solid length for any kind of full-length novel. If we write 4 days a week, and each of those days we focus on 1,500 words per session, that averages us out to 6,000 words a week. 6,000 words a week times 4 weeks, 24,000 words a month, right? So, 100,000 divided by 24,000, easy simple. That's about 3 months and 1 week of writing to get a first draft. And no, don't talk to me about what if I delete stuff and blah blah blah. First draft, you just go. Okay? Worry about the cleanup later. When you have a solid plot, or at least plot markers for where you're trying to go, it's a lot easier to get that writing goal done per day. And that's exactly how I do my writing schedule. I absolutely do treat books not just like a creative thing, but also like a product, right? Because that's what it is. And I know folks who spend years and years and years on the same book, but as writers, especially in this era where self-publishing is becoming a lot more popular, that's not viable if you actually want to build your audience and build your profile and your portfolio as an author. I give myself 3 months to write the first draft, I give myself 3 months to revise it like a mofo, and then comes release. And when we break it down like that, yeah, my writing schedule isn't exactly strenuous. Today the day I'm recording this, is one of my rest days from writing. I usually don't write on the weekends, and then I don't write on Wednesdays. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I am sitting there for a 3-hour block of time trying to get minimum 1,500 words. And sometimes I do more. Sometimes I get a little bit under, but I try to hit that goal, and it all usually averages out. It's way more fucking sustainable than NaNoWriMo, I'll tell you that. And it's exactly the timetable I'm giving myself right now for The Glass Witch's sequel, which title and cover yet to be released and determined. Breaking it down this way means also that in that 3 months, I do have some time to revise as I go, or at least to sit down at the end of the night and say, okay, here's where we're at,
let's make sure I have a game plan for tomorrow. And that's the most important part. Show up with a game plan the next day. Like I was saying before, way easier to hit your word count goal if you have some kind of plot outline, or at least plot markers, to guide you in what you're trying to write next. I also like to sometimes break down my story into pieces, because, I do point of view chapters, so it's easier to chunk them apart and kind of like treat them like little separate objects, and then just write the ones that flow and save the ones that don't for later. Tell me your writing schedule in the comments.
Alright, now let me show you how a writer deals with just an absolute mess of a day. Which means I just really couldn't get to writing first because I had client tarot to do, I had this little guy to deal with. But of course, that's okay because look how cute he is. After finishing up video editing and all that, it was time to go to the gym with Mom, who has the cutest cat I've ever met, and of course, steal her snacks. And then go food shopping because I had no food left in my house. My god, to think I was gonna cook dinner today on top of all this, but I couldn't skip this because I did just have nothing in my fridge. Time works differently when you grocery shop because 1 hour becomes like 3. And then of course when your mom asks you to stay over an hour or so for coffee, you gotta stay over for coffee and also steal more of her food. So by the time I get home and get situated, it's about 5:15 p.m. and I have to deal with this guy again. Captain Fuck-Ass Extraordinaire. But you know what, that's okay. I accept my bird for the lovable fuck-ass that he is. Way too late to write in the office, so writing on the laptop it is, and you know what? That's okay. So here's the thing, right? As I said before, I actually did write like literally already 100,000 word draft that I basically scrapped. Don't ask me how much that hurts. However, with my goal of 1,500 words a day, it turns out I managed to still get an end word count that was pretty wild. Oh my god, sir, how'd you write that much? Oh, I did not. I managed to find a couple things that I could salvage in my garbage heap and add that onto some new writing. Maybe that's cheating, but you know what? Hey, fuck it, it works. So sitting at nearly 6,000 words, yeah, I'd say that's a successful recoup. Ladies and gentlemen, we did it, if just barely, but we did a full week of writing. First though, this morning I had to make some bread because I had none left. So I was up early for that, and I would say early bird gets the worm, but he seems more interested in toes. Now, this bread recipe I've actually showed off before, but as a sourdough recipe, unfortunately I had to get rid of my sourdough starter because it's just too much of a pain in the ass to deal with. So here is the instant yeast version. It is just as good in my opinion, and honestly a lot faster, a lot easier. But then I have to go put on my face, and while I'm doing that, let me tell you a little bit about what I've been learning about writing so far. As writers, I feel like it's natural for us to treat our books like our kids, and that's understandable and everything, but at the same time, there comes a point where you have to realize that your book is also a job, right? It stopped being your baby and starts being a deadline that you really gotta stick to because, like at any other job, you can't just screw around on deadlines. And while that mindset sounds like it kills creativity, honestly, what it does do for me is just kills the fear that I have of messing it up. Breakfast of Champions before we get into today's tarot, which... honestly, there is no rest having a bird in the house, as one might imagine. But with the bread done, the makeup on, the client tarot also handled, finally, 2 hours later, we were ready to start. I give myself about 3 hours max, but I start counting that 3 hours at 9, so really I had less than 3, which meant I had to go. And nothing helps me write when I'm writing quite like some good mood music, which this is for the main character, this is definitely her stuff. Took a quick break to make a smoothie, and then desperately check and see where I was, only to see I was still short. But just an hour, not even actually, less than an hour later, we were there. Oh my goodness, look at that end word count for the week. I rewarded myself with a trip down to see the cows, and then, by the way, yeah, that bread came out very, very good. It's a Friday in the middle of Lent, so you know that means that dinner was a no-meat situation. We made shakshuka instead. And with all that said and done, it's another very successful week as a professional writer.